This is the Badger247 podcast with your host, Evan Flood.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bullish on Graham Mertz. I'll admit I might have overdone it with that one piece after Saturday's win. Rewatching it, I wasn't as impressed the second time around. However, I did call my shot a little bit after fall camp, so I'm going to stick to my guns on him. Like I said in the piece, a lot of the stuff I saw in fall camp showed up Saturday. I'm going to bring Mike on here in a little bit. He can tell me if I'm wrong. Could use a little more argument in podcasts, I think. It gets a little stale if two people just agree with us. So I'm hoping Mike rips into me for my Graham Mertz takes. I'm not going to tell him about this ahead of time. I just want to see what he does. All right, let's bring in Badger247 beat writer Mike Hogan. All right, Mike, so you can tell me if I made too much of Graham Mertz's first start of the season. I mean, last year, he felt like a guy that just never looked sure of himself, specifically with his pre-snap reads. You saw jittery feet, hesitation in the pocket. A lot of times he didn't know where he wanted to go with the football. That led to a lot of sacks, errant throws. Saturday, I thought he looked like a guy that knew what he wanted to do, had complete command of that offense, and simply put, I haven't seen him look like that since his first start against Illinois in 2020.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wasn't around back in 2020 when he had that, nearly perfect game against Illinois, but that's the best game I've certainly seen him play, and I think there's an argument to be made about not making too much of that game and not looking too much into a performance like that against probably the worst team they'll see all year, if not the second worst team. But I think he showed exactly what fans wanted him to show. He didn't make any big mistakes. All of his throws were pretty much on the money. His first incompletion was a ball that should have been caught for a pretty big gain by Marcus Allen over the middle of the field. And then his second incompletion was a ball in the end zone that the defensive back made a pretty good play on, that I went back and watched. It was a pretty impressive play. But yeah, I think he did what you wanted, what we wanted to see, what fans wanted to see, what you wanted to see out of him in that game. Just efficient. He's making good decisions. He's taking the check down when that's necessary. He hit the tight ends a couple times on those shallow crossing routes. When those linebackers dropped out of coverage. We obviously got to see a new wrinkle too in the third quarter when DK went 74 yards in that screen pass. And Mertz said after the game that there are more wrinkles to come. But yeah, I think I don't think that we're making too much of it. I think that it's what was expected. I guess you probably expect a good game, but considering that he hadn't had a performance like that in so long, I guess you could say it was refreshing to see if you're a fan from that perspective.
And you and I talked about this in fall camp. We didn't expect this passing offense to all of a sudden jump to the top 50 nationally and be world beaters. And we'll know a lot more Saturday when Wisconsin faces Washington State. It didn't look like a great defense from what I saw against Idaho, but it's certainly Power 5 talent, Power 5 coaches going against him, and now teams have some film on Mertz as well from last week and can get a feel for what Bobby Ingram likes to do offensively. But you and I were kind of confused as to why maybe other people in the media weren't as high on Graham Mertz and that passing offense, especially from what it looked in. I mean, spring was a train wreck. I mean, he was missing guys right in front of his face. Yeah. It was bad. I mean, you and I both said that in the spring. We were like, what is going on with this new offense? And I thought it looked, I don't want to say night and day, but the mistakes were cut down in fall camp. That ball was coming out quicker. He was putting passes where only his receiver could get it or nobody. I felt like a lot of the things that we saw in fall camp did carry over to Saturday. And like you said, if he can just be solid, that's enough for Wisconsin to win 9, 10, 11 games.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, too. What we saw in fall camp was exactly what we saw on Saturday against Illinois State. He was efficient. He didn't make mistakes, and it just was a solid overall game for him. It wasn't anything special. He did not have any throws, any big deep bombs down the field that really took everyone's breath away. But I think that's exactly who he needs to be for this team to win, to be in the conversation to win the Big Ten West and to get to Indianapolis again. That kind of performance, I think that's something that can be emulated. That if he can do that all year, they're going to have a chance with that defense, with the rushing attack. If Mertz can just do his job, complete passes, when without making mistakes, that's going to be a good recipe for them. And I think that's a good point. What we saw carried over. And, in spring ball, I guess it was kind of hard to see coming. I mean, you mentioned it. I mean, there were so many mistakes. And I guess you can look at that now and say maybe that part of that was just a new offense being put in place. And, there's some new parts on the offensive line, too. But, yeah, night and day difference from fall and spring. And I guess, now we can finally say that yes, it did carry over for one game. It's still only one game. But on Saturday, yeah, it was an impressive performance for Mertz.
Well, now we got to pray that Mertz doesn't come back down to earth against Washington State and make us look stupid. But we do got to address the defensive side of the ball. Hunter Wohler goes down with what looked like an ankle injury, UW calling it a leg injury, expected to be out for a substantial amount of time here. How big of an injury do you think this is to the defensive side of the ball, or do you feel like Preston Zachman, Kamoy Latu, maybe Titus Toller, Austin Brown, that's enough by committee to help replace what's one of the more talented players on this defense, certainly one of the brighter young stars on it as well?
Well, in April, it would have been much bigger of a deal when they had no depth at safety. In April, when spring ball ended, they're down to two guys who played college football, and John Torchio and Hunter, obviously Wohler. Those are the only two guys left with game experience, with Blaylock and Zachman both out with injuries. But now, I mean, I think it's obviously a big deal. You're losing a starter, a guy like you said, one of the more talented players on this defense, who was really just starting to make a big impact on this team. But I feel good about the depth they have there. I think Latu, just watching back on that game, on Saturday, I think he made a couple of nice plays. He had one pass breakup, I believe. I don't know if they gave him pass breakup on that or not, over the middle of the field. But I like what he gives you, and I think I wrote about Zachman in fall camp. I think he's made some pretty big strides. I think this is really the first time we've gotten to consistently see him on the field. He dealt with a hip injury last year. He suffered that in fall camp. Didn't play all last year, and then he was out again in spring ball with kind of the same injury. So he had to deal with a couple different things there. But in fall camp, I thought he looked good. I think he gives him something different too. As a former linebacker, he can be a little bit more physical. He's comfortable playing down in the box, making those run plays. I mean, he talked about that too, and how he thinks that sets him apart. That's one of his strengths. Latu, we talked about, just a really aggressive player. I really liked what I saw him on Saturday. And then you're talking about potentially seeing Austin Brown maybe get some snaps. You followed him pretty closely, obviously, through the recruitment. Definitely sounds like Leonard is really high on him. Just the athletic ability and the natural talent and gifts he has as an athlete, is something that's intriguing to watch. But it's going to come down to, how well has he grasped the scheme, and then the mental side of the game. That's always a tough part of it for, these young guys. So we'll see if we'll see him at all. He was one of the few guys who, few true freshmen who did get some action on Saturday, mostly on special teams, though.
You got a Bills game to get back to, and I'm sure you're sweating bullets with this 10-10 halftime scoreline right now, especially after that hot start. They're not looking so good, shooting themselves in the foot here. But NIL, you were at the press conference today. I'll just be frank, Wisconsin's losing some guys in both sports that I think they would normally get. They haven't necessarily been at the forefront of this or been able to compete with some of the numbers getting thrown around by other schools. What did you learn today, and does it give you a sense that Wisconsin will be more competitive in this market as college football, college basketball recruiting just continues to change?
Well, I'm not ready to make any bold predictions about whether or not they're going to be more competitive or if they're catching up to these other schools. But I will say that this is a good step in the right direction for them to kind of get back in that conversation. When this whole thing was kind of started in June, when they initially released this thing, to me, and this is not the way they described it to me, but this is just my opinion. It seemed a little unorganized. It seemed a little bit, thrown together, just kind of a knee-jerk kind of thing. The way it was explained to me today, they released the press release in June as a preview. This was just a preview to everything that had just come out today about this collective. But anyway, it did seem a little bit more organized today. That's really my main takeaway. It was more organized. They have a plan in place, to contribute to the student athletes' experience here in the NIL space. Obviously, a big part of it is raising money and finding opportunities for them to strike deals and to profit off their name, image, and likeness, obviously. But another part of it too, I think this was the most interesting part to me, is that they have a lot of former athletes involved, and this isn't just going to be about money. It's going to be about hey, let's set you up. Some of you guys might go off to play professionally, but a lot of you won't. I think they're doing their emphasis on their secondary emphasis on finding out professional opportunities for these kids for internships and networking. That was interesting to me. In terms of recruiting, I don't know. We'll have to see. Obviously, they didn't come out and say they're not. They said they're going to follow the rules and everything, and they made that pretty clear. But I don't know if this will help them in recruiting or not. We'll have to see. How things go. This is really only just starting. Like I said, they tried to start in June. They clearly had a lot to work through and come up with a plan. I'm looking at the 3 or 4 page packet they handed out today with all this great information. So yeah, it was definitely more organized. There's one takeaway I had. That was it. They seemed like they had a pretty comprehensive plan in place to start. Maybe making a comeback in this regard, this NIL space, because like you said, they were a little bit slow to the punch with the collective. Another thing I found interesting too is that they're pretty involved. The UW athletic department is pretty involved with this. Not they don't have a direct hand in it, but they're working pretty closely with this varsity collective. On NCAA compliance. The leadership group obviously is very in tune with the coaching staff. Paul Christ, Greg Gard, Kelly Sheffield, a couple other UW coaches were there today at the press conference. Kind of listening in on what the leadership team had to say. So I think it was an encouraging first step in the right direction for this group here.
Last question, will you be jumping through a fold-out table if the Bills win tonight?
I don't know. I don't think they're going to win. I have no faith in them after they ripped my soul out of me in Kansas City last year. But I have no folding table at my disposal here, so I'll have to just break my kitchen table instead. I don't know.
That works. I absolutely hate NIL, by the way. If you notice, I don't say much about it or do any stories or really get involved in the boards. That's why. I'm still hoping the government steps in and kind of nukes this thing and at least puts some guidelines around it, because right now it's just terrible. It's the wild, wild west. It's exactly what you didn't want in the first place, which is essentially people buying kids. Now you just made it legal. Like I said, I think I know Wisconsin has lost certain players because of this. I mean, everybody's got a price, right? If you can't create a level playing field with this, especially in college football, the parity that you say you hate so much, the lack of parity that you say you hate so much is only going to get worse. The other thing I hate but also find interesting is the dynamic between teams. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these guys know what each other's getting up front when they sign, and I'm talking more in the future here, but I'm sure they know or will know. I mean, what if you outperform that person? What do you think that does to a locker room? You're going to have a hard time selling me on the idea that that kind of thing is good for college sports. But who knows? The NCAA doesn't exactly have a track record of being proactive or reacting to things at all within an ideal time period. So maybe 10, 15, 20 years we'll get some rules in place that help clean this thing up. Fingers crossed.
It's time for the last word.
Short podcast today. For the final word, let's do biggest takeaway from Wisconsin's first recruiting weekend of the 2022 season. I think it's basketball. I think it's on the basketball end. I don't know if we learned a lot about where things stand with a quarterback in that class. Wisconsin's got 2 more coming in for the Washington State game. I'm sorry, 1 more. The other's 2024. Greg Gard in the basketball program had an absolutely monster weekend. Davion Hanna, the touted 2025 wing out of Nicolet, was in town. Daniel Freitag, who we talked to earlier in this week, was on campus. James Brown, a borderline 5-star center, made his second visit to Madison. And Jackson McAndrew, a 2024 forward, came away with an offer. I think McAndrew's a kid that's right in Wisconsin's wheelhouse and somebody, as of today, I'd probably project them to get. But the big news I thought was Hanna. I said this a year ago, I'll say it again. They can potentially get this guy. I don't know if I would project it, especially not this early. I know where this recruitment's going to go. He's going to have, if he doesn't get the offers, he's going to have strong blue blood interest. He's that good. But the kid's got some love for Wisconsin. If you didn't read that interview, this is the second time. I mean, he kind of considers Madison, I don't know if I'd say a second home, but he continues to say it feels like home. He's been to camp. He played at the Kohl Center last year in the state tournament, so he's been there more than just visits as well. Wisconsin does not do particularly well in the Milwaukee area. They haven't signed a scholarship player there since Marcus Landry in 2005. Haven't really gone after many, though, either, for various reasons. But Hanna's a kid. He and Wisconsin sort of check a lot of boxes for each other. And this is kind of one of those recruitments I talk about where a Johnny Davis, having that guy, is going to pay off. Didn't take Greg Gard long to sort of make that comparison with Hanna. Obviously, they're going to use that with every big-name wing they go after for the most part, and probably a lot of guards too. But they finally have a guy they can really sell to some of these inner-city kids who may not typically look at Wisconsin all that hard because of their up-tempo style, the prospects I'm saying, not Wisconsin. But now Gard and company can sort of point to Johnny Davis and see it works. And don't get me started with the stereotype. I've beaten that one to death. I think everyone knows where I kind of stand on it. We don't need to spend 10 minutes breaking that thing down. But from also what I'm told, Hanna's a guy that takes his academics seriously. He's also sort of an all-around player. He's not enamored with getting a lot of shots up and dribbling all the time. And that's kind of why Wisconsin really likes him too and prioritized him as early as they did. He's wired a little differently. Don't get me wrong, he's certainly got this assassin, want to take your head off on the floor type mentality. But Hanna's not this ball hog, over-dribbling type prospect. He does a little bit of everything on the floor, and he just gets it. You know, you watch him play, he's got a very blue-collar nature about him. He shows up across the board. You know, he's willing to sacrifice his body, get on the floor for 50-50 plays. He's willing to create for others. If he makes a mistake, you don't see him pouting, complaining to the refs. He gets his butt back on defense and gets back to work. Again, this is going to be a very tough recruitment for a school like Wisconsin to win, but there are some parallels, and assistant coach Sharif Chambliss, from what I've heard, has done a very, very, very good job early with Hannah and the family. He's been there for, I believe, if not a year, very close to a year already, kind of showing his face at open gyms and whatnot, and he's already gotten in deep on that one. Long way to go, and Hannah's offer list isn't even close to being finished. But Wisconsin's done a very, very, very good job early, and we'll see how that one goes over the next 2 years. Can you wait? Can you wait that long? All right, thanks again for tuning in. Yes, I know we're still not on Apple, Spotify, wherever podcasts go. Bear with me. I'll make a call tomorrow. Badgers, Washington State, 2:30 at Camp Randall. We'll be back for a recap of Week 2. We'll see you next time.